Welcome to the second virtual ABA Death Penalty Representation Project Annual Awards Program. Thank you for gathering with us this evening to acknowledge the efforts of dedicated advocates who zealously represent death row prisoners. While we are only able to single out a few for special recognition this evening, we salute all of you who labor tirelessly to bring justice to those on death row and to better our criminal justice system. The ABA Death Penalty Representation Project appreciates your commitment to representation of these individuals and the challenging issues, constant hurdles, and emotional stress presented in this area of practice, particularly when all of you are coping with pandemic-related stresses as well. Since 1986, the project has doggedly pursued its mission to improve the quality and availability of legal representation for persons facing possible death sentences or execution. We do this by working to improve the systems that provide legal services to indigent defendants, to educate the bar and public about the crisis of counsel for death row prisoners, and to recruit, train, and support lawyers like you to take on capital post-conviction cases as pro bono counsel. Since its inception, the project and its pro bono partners have represented almost 400 prisoners, and 102 clients have had their sentences reduced or vacated. However, for 150 of our clients and many others who are in need of counsel, the struggle is ongoing. The project accomplishes all of this work on a tight budget and through a small staff of 2 who have special expertise: Director Emily Olsen-Galt and staff attorney Christina Matheson. We know that many of you and your firms provide financial support to the project in addition to representation, and we are grateful for your continued support in these times. We extend special thanks to our defender-level sponsors, Crowell & Moring, Greenberg Traurig, and King & Spalding, and to our champion-level sponsors, Kirkland & Ellis, the Sidley Austin Foundation, and Skadden. In addition to this evening's honorees, we will be joined by ABA President Reggie Turner, who will join us to help kick off the program. We are fortunate to have the inspired leadership of our director, Emily Olsen-Galt, who guides the project with boundless energy, enduring optimism, and compassion. You will hear from Emily now, followed by ABA President Reggie Turner.
Thank you, Susie, and welcome everyone to the 2021 Volunteer Recognition and Awards event. Every year at this event, I take a moment to reflect on the year that has passed since we last gathered to celebrate our outstanding volunteer attorneys. This year, I'm struggling a bit to find the words to describe this past year because the reality is that there are no words that can adequately convey what we've all experienced. So many of us are struggling with challenges that we've never faced before. Many of us layers upon layers of those challenges to the point that we can't even keep track of them all. I know this is certainly the case for the amazing advocates that represent death sentence prisoners. In late 2020 and early 2021, the federal government executed 13 prisoners in rapid succession, far faster and in far greater numbers than ever seen before at the federal level. At the same time, we saw a radical shift at the US Supreme Court, which began not only denying requests for stays of execution that were brought before it, but affirmatively stepping in to overturn existing stays of execution that have been hard fought and won in the lower courts. On top of this, defenders were forced to make an impossible choice between providing effective representation to their clients whose lives were at stake and protecting their own health and safety amid a global pandemic. Faced with all this and so much more, it's understandable that this community is profoundly exhausted and discouraged. But I hope this event will serve as a reminder of the bright spot in all this darkness, because that bright spot is you, our pro bono attorneys and capital defender partners. When we say that these attorneys represent the very best of the legal profession, this is why. You have dedicated your brilliant minds and generous hearts and even your physical well-being to protect the most marginalized and vulnerable members in society. As terrible as things have been, and make no mistake, they have been terrible, you have won groundbreaking victories and moved the conversation about the death penalty forward by leaps and bounds, even amid the losses. So as much as we mourn the events of the past year, we are fiercely committed to celebrating everyone who has continued the fight. And that is what we are here to do this evening. We especially celebrate the work of our 3 award winners, Greenberg Traurig, Munger, Tolson Olson, and Professor Sandra Babcock. These 3 award recipients exemplify what it means to be zealous advocates through their tireless dedication and their resilience to any obstacle that might be thrown in their way. They are bringers of hope to us all. Hope for justice for their clients, hope for a vastly improved legal system, and hope for many, many brighter days ahead. Thank you again for joining us today, and enjoy the program.
Thank you and good evening. As president of the American Bar Association, it is my pleasure to join you for the 2021 Volunteer Recognition and Awards Program to celebrate those who make the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project such an important program, profound pro bono opportunity for its volunteers, and an invaluable service to its clients. People facing the death penalty often test our commitment to justice and fairness more acutely than most clients. We are grateful for the firms and lawyers involved with the Death Penalty Representation Project who stand up for the legal rights of these individuals. Thank you, Chair Susan Hoffman, project members and staff for your impressive dedication and extraordinary work to help ensure equal justice under law. We're also here to provide well-deserved recognition to this year's honorees. Congratulations to Greenberg Traurig and to Munger, Tolles, and Olson for receiving the Exceptional Service Award, and to Professor Sandra Babcock, Faculty Director of the Cornell Center on the Death Penalty Worldwide, for receiving the 2021 John Paul Stevens Guiding Hand of Counsel Award. You inspire our profession and bring us closer to a more just world. Thank you to all the honorees for the example you set. And thank you all for attending this event and showing your support for this important project of the American Bar Association. This celebration of good works underscores what we can accomplish together as lawyers and as citizens. I am so proud of everything you do to support the ABA's efforts to fulfill the American promise of justice for all.
Thank you, President Turner. We appreciate your support for our attorneys who do this important work and for our clients. And now, on to the awards presentations. Our first Exceptional Service Award goes to Greenberg Traurig, a firm that time and time again has taken on the most challenging capital cases in which success is improbable, but zealous representation nevertheless important, both for the individual clients and for the integrity of our criminal justice system. Greenberg Traurig's dedication is evident in its response to numerous last-minute requests for assistance in cases with an active execution warrant. For example, in 2018, the firm represented death row prisoner Rodney Burgett, advocating that he should not be executed because of his intellectual disability, exploring creative approaches and fighting all the way to the Supreme Court, which unfortunately ultimately denied the petition. The firm's steadfast commitment to those on death row continued during the pandemic, with the firm petitioning for a delay in the execution of Dustin Honkin so that his spiritual advisor could safely access the execution chamber. The firm has taken on 2 additional habeas cases since 2020, one in state court and one in federal court. The firm's pro bono work on capital cases reflects its unwavering commitment to achieving the fair and just operation of the capital defense system in this country. we are proud to honor Greenberg Traudig's extraordinary contributions with the Exceptional Service Award.
Hi all, my name is Stuart Lev. I'm the senior litigator for the Capital Habeas Unit for the Federal Community Defender Office in Philadelphia. And I've been a capital litigator for 25 years. I'm really honored tonight to be here in support of my friends and collaborative associates at Greenberg Traudig, and to tell you a little bit about how well deserving they are of this important award that they're receiving tonight. One case in particular that I want to tell you about tonight deals with Dustin Honkin. Greenberg Traudig put together a great complaint that laid out all of the reasons why it was a violation of religious liberty to keep a spiritual advisor out of the chamber. And after negotiating with the Department of Justice, the department came around and agreed that the religious advisor could be in the chamber, not just for Dustin, but for all the people who were executed as a result of what they've done, of what they were able to help do in the federal cycle. Other jurisdictions have had to change their policies, and now even Texas has changed its policy from banning spiritual advisors in the chamber to allowing spiritual advisors in the chamber. And even though this might not stop executions the way we would want to, it supplies a really important consideration for our clients. Just have really loved working with Greenberg Traudig. Their attorneys are incredibly collaborative, incredibly respectful of the work that that our team at the Federal Defender had done over the years. They work collaboratively with us in a really great way, and they're really deserving of the award they're getting tonight.
I'm Caroline Heller. I am a litigation shareholder in Greenberg Traudig's New York office. I'm chair of Greenberg Traudig's Global Pro Bono Program, and I'm the Pro Bono Coordinator for the New York office. Greenberg Traudig's Pro Bono Program is built on fighting social, racial, and economic injustice. And death penalty work so often falls into one or more of those categories. Our clients are typically individuals of color, they are typically low income, and sometimes they also have intellectual disabilities. I am so grateful at the support that Greenberg Traudig has demonstrated for its attorneys who want to work on death penalty cases. And I am in awe of my colleagues at all of the work they put into these cases. Personally, I do death penalty work because I believe that death penalty is unjustly applied and at its core is also an unjust punishment. I am so grateful to the ABA for this program. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the capital habeas units that we often work on these death penalty cases with. The attorneys at these units are incredible human beings who have dedicated their lives to this work. And I have been so lucky to work with them on some of our death penalty cases.
I'm so grateful to work at Greenberg Traudig, where pro bono work is not only available, but encouraged even at the staff level, allowing secretaries and paralegals like myself to assist in these cases. I got involved originally as a secretary working with an attorney on this matter. After receiving my paralegal certificate, I wanted to continue on this case as a paralegal because I saw how significant and impactful the work being done is. I wanted to continue to help on not only our client, but the team. There's no question that our client did not have a fair trial because he essentially had no defense for his trial. I'm working with an amazing team of attorneys, investigators, and a mitigation specialist to help get our client a fair shake. The team I'm working with has and continues to explore the many avenues that weren't looked at during the trial. As a paralegal, I get to work directly with the team to help gather and organize the voluminous materials, organize witness files and evidence, and assist with interviews that are used to prepare the petition to help get post-conviction relief for our client. The secretaries and paralegals that help on this case are so important in keeping the materials organized so that they can easily be accessible when needed by the entire team. It's incredible to see and be a part of such a dedicated team, and the appreciation and gratitude from the client is truly special.
I started working in law school on capital appeals as part of Berkeley Law's death penalty clinic. I was so thrilled when I got to Greenberg Traurig that they were passionate about capital appellate work and that I had the opportunity to work on some incredible cases, including one that I'm working on now in North Carolina. The partnership that we have with outside appointed counsel is tremendous, and we have a really great professional relationship with them. I've certainly learned a lot from working with them, and I think we contribute a lot to the client's case as well. We've actually managed to have some really great early success in our client's case, uncovering Brady violations, prosecutorial misconduct, and various other legal claims that we're excited to bring on behalf of the client. I'm honored to work for a firm that puts so much emphasis on working on these high stakes, very important cases, and I'm thrilled that the firm is being recognized for the work. The resources that Greenberg Traurig's been able to contribute to the client's case and to our team with outside counsel has really been helpful. I'm so grateful that the firm is committed to dedicating those types of resources to these really high stakes, meaningful cases, and I know the client is grateful as well.
As a former prosecutor, it's important to me now in private practice to volunteer my time for death penalty cases. Now, I never worked capital cases when I was a prosecutor, but I did have an understanding that we as prosecutors were sheltered from some of the more personal or human consequences of the exercise of our authority. And so when I joined Greenberg Traurig, volunteering on death penalty cases is a way to see and to participate in that human or personal dimension when it's really at its most consequential. When Greenberg Traurig teamed up with a terrific group of federal defenders on Dustin's case, it really was only a couple weeks before his execution. And so there was a tremendous sense of urgency. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court denied our application to stay the execution, which meant that it was going to go forward in the midst of the COVID pandemic, putting everyone in attendance at great risk of harm. We were able to force the Bureau of Prisons to allow Dustin to have his spiritual advisor, Father O'Keefe, by his side in the execution room to minister to him in the way that his Catholic faith told him. Naturally, I have mixed emotions about the work that we did on Dustin's case. On the one hand, of course, it was tremendously rewarding and meaningful. We were able to secure for Dustin some measure of spiritual comfort in his hour of need. And Dustin's case has subsequently been cited by others like Dustin to be able to have their spiritual advisors at their side in the execution room. But of course, on the other hand, Dustin isn't here with us today, and that is a hard reality to grapple with. I just have to keep telling myself that's a reason to keep going, not to give up. Dustin's case was my first death penalty case, but it is not my last.
What an incredible record of service to death row prisoners and our criminal justice system. Thank you again to Greenberg Traurig for all your work over the past decades. We are honored to present the second Exceptional Service Award of the evening to Munger, Tolles, and Olson. Munger Tolles' work has encompassed litigation, challenging complex system issues, as well as representation of individual prisoners whose rights are in jeopardy. Through its systemic reform efforts, Munger Tolles' work has had a broad impact on death sentence prisoners throughout the country. The firm spent more than a decade representing prisoners challenging lethal injection protocols in California, winning a permanent injunction, which has resulted in no executions moving forward in that state since 2006. A Supreme Court success in one of the many individual cases that the firm has handled reflects its continued commitment to individual representation as well. As a result of Munger Toll's compelling argument on behalf of client James McWilliams, the Supreme Court issued a 5-4 decision in his favor, stating that a defendant is entitled to receive assistance from a mental health expert that is independent of the prosecution. Excuse me. Notably, the firm has shown an exceptional willingness to assist even those accused of the most heinous crimes out of a recognition that in such cases the need for vigorous and excellent representation is greatest. The firm is currently representing Jahar Tsarnaev in the direct appeal of his conviction for the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013 and will be arguing his case before the Supreme Court this fall. As is clear from this case and the others handled by the firm, Munger Toll's lawyers and staff have fought tirelessly for the lives of their clients. We are proud to recognize Munger Toll's exemplary commitment to death penalty representation with the Exceptional Service Award.
I am so pleased to have this opportunity to talk about the work Munger did on the lethal injection litigation challenging the Bureau of Prisons execution protocol. The team from Munger was Ginger Anders, Jonathan Meltzer, Brendan Gantz, April Hu, and Chris Lynch. It feels long overdue to recognize Munger for their work on method of execution challenges. This is because Don Verrilli and Ginger Anders have worked on so many important cases over about 15 years. This has included the Taylor case from Missouri in all stages, the Morales case from California in all stages, and then Bays v. Reese, of course, in the Supreme Court, and Don did that argument in the Supreme Court. The Johnson case from Missouri in the 8th Circuit and in the Supreme Court, amicus briefs in Supreme Court cases, and then just countless issues and cases that they consulted on, supported litigation teams, and helped. I don't think it's possible to cover all of it. Throughout 2020 and 2021, Munger worked with about 20 other plaintiffs and their counsel through many, many rounds of emergency injunction litigation, including 2 emergency stay rounds for Mr. Bernard after his execution date was set in the fall of 2020. During that 6-week period, the Munger team partnered with counsel for Orlando Hall and then Alfred Bourgeois to seek stays of execution in the Circuit Court, en banc, and in the Supreme Court. So I hope this gives you a sense of their tremendous contribution in just this one area. And then along the same lines, it's important to note that lethal injection is just one area where Munger has worked on behalf of death sentence prisoners. Many colleagues have shared stories of lawyers from Munger generously sharing their time, sharing their expertise, taking calls, answering questions, reading pleadings, and just always so willing to help, so willing to jump in. So I know I speak for many when I say thank you to Munger for their mighty, mighty work. Thank you.
Thank you. We are so grateful for this recognition and for everything that the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project does. MTO has a long history of pro bono capital representation, and the past 18 months or so have been no exception. Among other things, the cases I've been involved in have included representing Jahar Tsarnaev in the Supreme Court and also representing Brandon Bernard last year in the collective effort to use challenges to the BOP's execution protocol to stave off the executions. But of course, anytime one firm is recognized for its efforts, it's a little bit of an oversimplification because so many others have been involved in these efforts. So I just wanted to say a little bit about that. Both those in the capital defense community who do this incredibly taxing work every day, and also others in private practice who have contributed so much. So in the Tsarnaev case, it's been the federal defenders of New York who expertly guided the case through the First Circuit and who were able to get Jahar's death sentences vacated. And now that the Supreme Court has granted cert, it's been a real privilege to work with all of them through the summer to try to put together the best Supreme Court brief that we possibly could. And in the case of Brandon Bernard, just thinking about all the lawyers involved in the BOP protocol case, there was the Philadelphia Capital Habeas Unit, the Georgia Federal Defenders, firms like Skadden Arps, Steptoe & Johnson, Hogan Lovells, King & Spalding, and others. And of course, the leadership of Megan McCracken, who has been the preeminent resource on lethal injection for many years now, and Ruth Friedman and her team at the Capitol Habeas Project, the Federal Capitol Habeas Project. It was a tremendous team effort, and everyone pitched in ways that were really inspiring. Through the fall, it didn't matter whose client had the most immediate date. Everybody contributed, everybody helped out in the middle of the night, everybody drafted sections of briefs and just did whatever needed to be done. But of course, despite that effort, we weren't able to stop 13 executions in 7 months. And I think about that, and I think about Brandon, our client, a lot. And so I just really hope that we at MTO can continue helping in any way we can to prevent something like that from ever happening again. So thank you for this recognition, and I just really hope that we can continue this important work with you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm very proud to be part of Munger, Tolles & Olson, a law firm that has both challenged a deeply flawed system for executing human beings and represented individual defendants who were unlawfully convicted and sentenced to die, having received totally inadequate representation by court-appointed lawyers at their trials. In 2006, we took on a case on behalf of an individual, Mr. Morales, challenging the effort by California prison officials to ram through regulations governing the execution of individuals by lethal injection without any opportunity for public comment or review by the California Office of Administrative Law or review by the courts. We successfully argued that the Administrative Procedure Act applied to such regulations over contentions by the state that the regulations were exempt because they were not generally applicable and applied only at a single prison where executions were conducted, San Quentin. The trial court enjoined any further executions in California unless and until the California prison officials adopted a lethal injection protocol that complied with the Administrative Procedure Act. For a decade thereafter, prison officials attempted, but unsuccessfully, to adopt such regulations that were consistent with the Administrative Procedure Act. And that resulted in an effective moratorium on executions in California for a dozen years. In 2016, California voters did adopt Proposition 66, which now formally exempts lethal injection regulations from the APA. But no executions occurred under that. And in 2019, Governor Newsom repealed the protocols by executive order and imposed a moratorium on executions. So we're very proud that since 2007, when we brought the lawsuit originally challenging the lethal injection protocols, there have been no executions in California. I'm very proud of all of this work that the firm has done in the area of the death penalty and look forward to doing more of it in the future. Thank you very much.
Munger Tolles has a long track record of working on death penalty litigation. And in particular, Brad Phillips and others at Munger had worked on the Morales case, which was a successful challenge under the California Administrative Procedure Act to California's lethal injection protocol. And that case, the result in that case ensured that the death penalty was not administered in California for almost a decade. And this was a case that Munger Tolles brought while I was still in law school before I joined Munger. After I joined Munger, when the opportunity arose, I was moved to help continue the effort against lethal injection in California. And by this point, the state of California had promulgated a new lethal injection regulation after Morales. And we partnered with the ACLU of Northern California to bring a Public Records Act action under California law to get public records so that Californians could submit informed public comment on the new lethal injection regulation. And in that Public Records Act action, the state of California took some very aggressive positions related to privileges over documents. And in challenging those positions, we were able to take testimony from the lawyer who had managed the process in creating the new lethal injection regulation. And that testimony cast doubt on the legality of the entire administrative process. So even before we brought that before we brought what we thought was going to be an Administrative Procedure Act action, the state rushed out to put out a new lethal injection regulation. We then brought up, after the Public Records Act action, we brought an APA challenge to that new regulation that was called the Masters case. And while the Masters case was pending, the governor of California signed an executive order putting in place a moratorium on the death penalty in California. And that executive order, of course, ended the case and ended the death penalty in California under the order. And it means a great deal to me to have had a chance to play a small role in the campaign against the death penalty in California. And I'm thankful to the many at Munger-Tolles, the ACLU, and many other organizations and law firms that have spent so much time and effort on this important fight throughout the country. I'd like to thank the ABA for giving this honor.
My name is April Hu, and I'm an attorney at Munger-Tolles & Olson. I want to spend some time describing a death penalty case we handled last year for someone you may have heard a lot about, Brandon Bernard. Brandon's case was part of a larger challenge to the execution protocol that the federal BOP had put in place in 2019. I think we all held out hope that when the administration began to rush schedule people for execution, that his name would not be on the list. Those hopes were dashed when we received word that his execution had been scheduled for December 10th, after which our efforts were really geared towards trying to get a stay based on our argument that the execution protocol violated the Federal Death Penalty Act because it didn't comply with the notice and scheduling provisions of Texas state law for executions. We fought for Brandon all the way to the Supreme Court, where we lost both a closely divided vote for rehearing en banc in the DC Circuit and ultimately before the Supreme Court itself. Throughout it all, we were fortunate enough to be on video calls with Brandon, who insisted on keeping our spirits up. Brandon was an incredible human being with grace and poise in equal measure. He would tell us as we frantically worked on his stay application and the calls for clemency increased, that he would be around in the spring to knit us all blankets in thanks. Brandon was a very gifted knitter. We joked about him having a direct line to Kim Kardashian West, who lobbied hard for his clemency application. But the law is difficult, and it is terribly inhumane at its worst. And I personally have never felt that more than during our final call with Brandon, when we told him the Supreme Court had denied his stay. And he continued still up until the point he was taken away by the guards to thank us and to lift our spirits. His last words were to the victim's family, and they were this: "If my death is what is needed to heal pain, then so be it." Brandon was pronounced dead at 9:27 p.m. He was 40, and he deserved so much more than what was done to him.
That was a truly inspiring presentation. We are so fortunate to have Munger-Tolles as longtime partners in this fight for justice. In the midst of the COVID pandemic surge in late 2020 and early 2021, the federal government carried out an unprecedented series of executions, beginning on July 14th, 2020, and ending on January 16th, 2021. The government executed 13 prisoners in total. These 13 executions, carried out in less than 6 months, represented more than 4 times the number of federal executions that had previously taken place in the entire modern death penalty era, and they ended a 17-year gap on the use of the federal death penalty. Given the pandemic surge, our defense teams had to surmount additional challenges of limited access to the courts, access to critical witnesses, and even access to their clients. A remarkable coalition of individuals, including capital defenders, pro bono attorneys, mitigation specialists, mental health experts, investigators, and policy advocates, formed during this time to face the challenges head on. Often at risk to their own safety and well-being, these teams worked day and night on behalf of the 13 prisoners facing execution. This evening, we are honored to be joined by 3 of the advocates who were on the front lines of the fight: federal defenders Sean Nolan and Kelly Henry, and pro bono attorney Katie Ali. We also welcome journalist Maurice Chammah. He reported on the executions and documented many of the problems that arose in the rush to carry them out before the change of administration. The efforts of these extraordinary attorneys and those of many others led to numerous days of executions based on themes recurring in our cases: intellectual disability, mental illness, prosecutorial misconduct, and effective representation. While lower courts repeatedly recognized the need to halt the execution and examine these claims in detail, the US Supreme Court, in unsigned late-night orders through its shadow docket, vacated each and every one of the stays, drawing forceful dissents from Justices Sotomayor and Breyer. On July 1st, 2021, Attorney General Merrick Garland imposed a moratorium on further federal executions while a review of the Justice Department's policies and procedures is pending. The following video tells the story of this unfortunate chapter in federal death penalty history and the heroes who gave everything they had to protect the rights of their clients under unimaginable circumstances.
Hi, folks. How are you? I'm Sean Nolan. I'm the head of the Capital Habeas Unit in the Philadelphia Federal Defender Office. We're a very large office. We represent lots of folks around the country. Sadly, we represented 3 of the 13 people who were executed by the Trump Barr administration last year. And so I'm supposed to talk about that. I'm not sure exactly what to say, but I have a few thoughts. A lot of it is anger. I think that me and my office have ended up being angry about this. And what we've tried to do since that time is figure out how to bottle that anger and use it to continue to do the work and to continue to represent the many, many clients that we have left, including those at Terre Haute. So, when I look back at these 13 executions, the one thing that just jumps out at me is that any of those 13 could have been spared, or all of those 13 could have been spared. Every one of them at some point had a stay of execution in place. As you know, the Supreme Court stayed up late at night over and over again to take away all stays in place to make sure, sadly, that all these executions went forward. I started thinking about this concept of the honor, the courage, and the horror of the work that we do. And as I was going to go to the prison, I was heading out there on an airplane and then getting ready to go. I was thinking about the courage. I didn't know if I would have the courage to walk in. But what I started thinking about was the movie and the book Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. And there was a scene where his client is executed by electrocution, and there's a close-up on his face in that scene. And about the next scene was him walking into the prison because he had other clients there. And that just really resonated with me in terms of this when I went to make that trip. And then I go back to thinking about the horror of what we've witnessed during these executions and many others, and in many of the work that all of you do as criminal defense lawyers and as attorneys. And the horror is, was something that I kept repeating in my head as I watched my client Dustin Honken be executed. And that comes from the movie Apocalypse Now, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. And there's a scene where Brando is, out in the jungle, and all of the atrocities that he's witnessed and participated in probably had him just whispering the horror, the horror, the horror. And I found myself whispering that in my head for the way too long time that it took them to kill Dustin Honken. But that is the horror of what we deal with, and we have to figure out how to deal with it. And then the third concept is the honor that we have to represent the most marginalized people in our society, especially those who are condemned to death. And it is an honor to represent them, and I've always felt that way. And so that's still how I feel, even with all of this anger. So I guess the bottom line for me right now is how I'm feeling is that, if we can harness that anger, and if we can find the courage to deal with the horror of the things that we have to deal with doing this work, then we'll be able to honor our clients in the past, our clients now, and our clients in the future. Honor them by thanking them for being able to represent them, and by giving them the most magnificent representation that is available on the planet. So that's kind of where I am today. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. I appreciate you all listening to my thoughts here, and I look forward to seeing you all in person as soon as possible.
Hi, my name is Maurice Shama, and I am the author of Let the Lord Sort Them, The Rise and Fall of the Death Penalty, which is a book that, as the name suggests, argues that capital punishment is disappearing in the United States. And I really think this is largely due to the work of defense lawyers, including many who represent people on death row pro bono. They have managed to educate the public over the last 2 generations about the many problems that have plagued the American death penalty since the 1970s, including inadequate resources for trial defenders, prosecutorial misconduct and myopia, and political motivations among district attorneys, judges, and governors. I turned in the final draft of this book just as the Trump administration was announcing that it was going to restart federal executions, and I covered elements of the execution spree last year for the Marshall Project, where I work, including the cases of Daniel Lee and Lisa Montgomery. I still think the death penalty is disappearing. The numbers bear that out, but the Trump administration's executions showed that the punishment is still very much a part of American life. More than 2,500 people remain on death row across the country, and technically they could face execution if the political circumstances in their state or in the federal government change. But what happened under Trump also surprised me, where in the 1990s, lawyers for people on death row were ostracized for representing those people. Now they are being welcomed into the conversation, and the public isn't just hearing about the crimes committed by those facing execution. They're also hearing about Lisa Montgomery's childhood traumas and mental illness. They're hearing about Brandon Bernard's limited role in his crime and his personal transformation behind bars. And they're hearing about Orlando Hall's remorse and the racial injustices that marred his case. This all, to me, represents a seismic shift. And in a way, by reviving the death penalty, the Trump administration forced Americans to think about whether they really want this punishment to continue. And I really think it was because of lawyers, often working pro bono, that this public conversation is happening.
Hi, I'm Katie Ali. I'm a partner at the law firm Hogan Lovells in Washington, D.C. And along with an incredible team of colleagues from Hogan Lovells and 2 other incredible lawyers, Rob Owen and Marcy Witter, I represented Orlando Hall. The Hogan Lovells team, who I worked with, got involved in this case on a moment's notice. And from that moment, worked around the clock, literally, sometimes pulling 22, 23-hour days and nights. In the weeks leading up to Orlando's execution, I think we were involved for 4 or 5 weeks. We filed 20 briefs and motions in 5 different courts. 16 of those briefs were filed in the 72 hours leading up to Orlando's execution. And I obviously wish the result had been different. And I think the pace with which this litigation happens, which was no fault of Orlando's, no fault of his longtime lawyers, but really was the fault of the government, having waited 13 years to set a date and then rushing to get this through amid a pandemic. It just shows how arbitrary the system is. I think that no court, Orlando had incredibly meritorious claims, and it wasn't even that they were denied, it was that no court ever actually considered them on the merits. And we see this over and over again. Orlando deserved a different result, but I'm so grateful to the team who represented him for fighting so hard on his behalf.
Last year, when the federal government initiated its spree of super spreader executions, we saw the best and the worst of the criminal legal system at work. Many of us were shocked at the bloodlust and speed of 13 executions over the course of 6 months. My personal experience deals with the Lisa Montgomery case. And there I saw the best in the criminal legal system and what we're here tonight to celebrate. The ways in which you, the law firms, stepped up to help all of us who were fighting to save our clients last year. In Lisa Montgomery's case, many of the firms and attorneys involved were former recipients of the Guiding Hand of Counsel Award, which speaks to the commitment and the importance of that award. We had 3 law firms, a legal clinic, the ACLU, and multiple resource counsel across the country helping us. O'Melveny and Myers gave us Megan Vergal and Alex Scherenbeck, who worked together with Sandra Babcock, Zora Ahmed, and Joe Margulies and their team at Cornell to represent Lisa in fighting for her right to have a fair clemency process. Morgan Lewis joined with the ACLU, attorney Michael D'Agostino and Robin Nunn, as well as Brian Stoll, Cassie Stubbs, David Fati, and others, working to help us improve the conditions that Lisa found herself in, which worked. Lisa was treated horrifically, but through their assistance, we were able to improve her circumstances just a little. And then we had amazing resource counsel, Denny LaBeouf and Mark Olive, who worked with us to craft the Ford litigation, which received a stay of execution from a judge in Indiana who was appointed by Donald Trump. Sadly, we saw the shadow docket at work. Lisa had 4 stays of execution in the final days of her life. And in the last 48 hours, we watched them one by one be picked off. It was the best of the legal system, and it was the worst of the legal system. And I would be remiss if I did not give acknowledgement to the amazing work of Laura Burstein and the Capital Litigation Communications Project, hosted by Squire Patton Boggs. Laura and her amazing team helped us to lift up the message of injustice in Lisa's case. At the end of the day, we were not able to save Lisa, but we were able to give Lisa dignity and to spread the word about the injustice that is done to women in our system, women who are victims of human trafficking. And the amazing Ed Ungvarsky, who gave us his time pro bono to work on Lisa's case, shared with us an email after Lisa's execution about how what happened to her was discussed in the Virginia legislature during the abolition movement there in Virginia. Though we did not save the lives of those 13 men and women, we made a difference. And that difference is continuing to resonate and will continue to resonate. And I am so grateful to all of you who stepped up to help us in this fight.
Thank you all for these incredible efforts. And now for a presentation of our John Paul Stevens Guiding Hand Award to Sandra Babcock, Clinical Professor of Law at Cornell University. Professor Sandra Babcock has dedicated her entire career to defending the rights of death-sentenced individuals, serving as a catalyst for systemic change across the globe. Along with her direct representation of individuals facing the death penalty, Professor Babcock has trained countless lawyers in the United States and Africa, consulted with scores of defense teams, and drafted resource materials and manuals that are now required reading for Capital Counsel. In recognition of Professor Babcock's unparalleled commitment to capital defense worldwide, her impact on countless numbers of death row prisoners and defenders, and the indelible mark she has left on the historical record of the death penalty, the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project is honored to present Sandra Babcock with the 2021 Justice John Paul Stevens Guiding Hand of Counsel Award. In the words of a colleague, Sandra's guiding hand has truly changed the world.
My name is Laura Douglas. I worked with Sandra as one of the Associate Directors of Research and Training at the Cornell Center on the Death Penalty Worldwide. Sandra and a number of anti-death penalty advocates founded the center to do international anti-death penalty work. I cannot imagine someone more deserving of the John Paul Stevens Guiding Hand of Counsel Award. Working with Sandra as a young lawyer, I've been so inspired by what she does in the world. She is a fierce human rights advocate and a brilliant lawyer, and she works in a very unique way. When Sandra recognizes a novel argument or a new avenue that she thinks anti-death penalty advocates should be making, we see her both apply this in her own cases at both domestic and international litigation. And we also see that she reaches out to and tries to support a large network of abolitionist lawyers and defense counsel in making these arguments themselves. When she sees an argument with merit, she tries to host trainings about it. She works on policy advocacy connected to it. And Sandra also does a lot of movement building around different issues in the death penalty world. She reaches out and has connections with journalists, with activists, and tries to link them up with abolitionist lawyers or defense attorneys. As a colleague, Sandra is just an incredible human too. She's very supportive of the other lawyers and other professionals, other people in her life. She's always volunteering to host people at her house so that people can be together and we could gather. She just puts a lot of energy into the people who surround her and is someone who just approaches colleagues in such a caring and loving way too. She creates very supportive environments with really wonderful people who are all trying to defend human rights.
Sandra Babcock is a remarkable woman and so deserving of the Justice John Paul Stevens Guiding Hand of Counsel Award. When I think of Sandra, I think of some of her best qualities, which are the fact that she is courageous, compassionate, and caring. I've known Sandra for over 2 decades, and I've never met a more intelligent, caring, and kind attorney. Sandra sees the holes in the system and then works to fill the gaps. She started the Alice Project because she saw that women in the criminal legal system were not receiving this type of individualized attention that their cases called for and required. When Sandra sent out the email to the habeas lists asking if anyone had women who were facing the death penalty or long incarceration, I answered that email within 30 seconds asking for Sandra's help. And Sandra could not have been more gracious. She took the case on with her legal clinic at Cornell, initially just to work on the international rights aspect of the case and to lift up the message about Lisa's unjust conviction and death sentence on an international stage. But then when my co-counsel Amy Harwell and I became sick with COVID, Sandra did not hesitate to step in to fill our shoes to represent Lisa as best she could, all the while taking care of Amy and I, checking in, making sure that we were okay, and helping us navigate what was one of the most difficult legal experiences of our careers. Sandra has become a true friend, and I am thrilled that the ABA has recognized her many contributions over the years to the death penalty community and to the cause of advocating for women who find themselves unjustly incarcerated. Congratulations, Sandra.
Hello, my name is Michael O'Connor, and I have the privilege and honor to say a few words on behalf of Sandra Babcock on this event of her receiving the Guiding Hand of Counsel award from the ABA. Sandra Babcock is an amazing person, an amazing lawyer. I first met her about 30 years ago when she was just getting out of law school. There was something about her when I met her, I knew that Sandra would be someone who would change the world. And I honestly felt that at the time, and I know it to be true today. For instance, her changing in the way that people represent immigrants who have been arrested, people who are non-citizens. The Mexican Capital Legal Assistance Program, which Sandra was not only the starting impetus, she was the guiding hand. She was the person who taught us all how to approach these cases and assert consular rights on behalf of foreign nationals who were being charged with capital offenses in the United States. She did amazing work. She took her clients' cases out of Texas, went to the World Court and the Avena litigation, And I had the great fortune of being close enough to watch her do what she was doing in that litigation, and it was amazing. I've had the great fortune to be someone who has worked with Sandra at the Makwanyani Institute at Cornell Law School. Amazing what she has done there. Literally freed hundreds of people from death row throughout Africa. Has changed the way representation is done in Africa. It's just astonishing to watch her work and to see what she has accomplished. I am truly honored to know you, Sandra. I love you. I think you are the greatest thing, and I am just thrilled that you're getting some of the recognition that you deserve. You could get an award like this every year for the rest of your life, and it still wouldn't be enough as far as I'm concerned. You're the best. Thank you, Sandra, for all you do, and thank you, the ABA, for recognizing what a wonderful attorney and gift we have in Sandra Babcock. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the ABA Death Penalty Representation Project. It is an incredible honor to receive this award, particularly from an organization that has done so much to provide desperately needed legal representation to men and women around the country facing the death penalty. I also have to thank my very dear colleagues at the Cornell Center on the Death Penalty Worldwide, along with Denny LeBeouf and Michael O'Connor and Celia Ruman for nominating me. Thank you. This work is so hard. Every single person I know who does this work has experienced incredible despair, grief, and burnout. But what has sustained me is the knowledge that I'm not alone. I'm part of an extraordinary community of lawyers and mitigation specialists, paralegals, activists, who are all engaged in the same struggle. We're like family. We squabble, we annoy the hell out of each other, but in the end, we always have each other's backs. I've been inspired and supported by so many people that it's impossible to name them all. Some of them you know, people like Denny LeBeouf, David Bruck, Kelly Henry, George Kendall, and my colleagues from Texas. My first job where I, after graduating from law school, represented people on death row there in a really dark time in the application of the death penalty in this country. But I also want to remember that we are part of a global struggle, and there are lawyers around the world who are doing this work under unfathomable conditions, who are so extraordinary. People like Nestor Toko in Cameroon, Tendai Biti in Zimbabwe, Sarah Bilal in Pakistan. And if I had one plea for this community, it's that we remember and that we express solidarity with the lawyers around the world who are engaged in this very same struggle. And we have so much knowledge and wisdom to share with them, but we also have so much to learn from them. I know this is not the Academy Awards, but I have to thank my husband, who is also, some of you may know, a death penalty lawyer. His name is Joe Margulies. He is the best advocate I know, and he has been my comrade in arms for the last 28 years, and I love him dearly. So thank you again, and good night.
Sandra, thank you for your dedicated efforts on behalf of those facing the death penalty across the globe. I can think of no more deserving advocate for this award. Congratulations to all of our honorees this evening. We are grateful for your enduring commitment, compassion for your clients, and belief that together we can improve our criminal justice system. Thank you for all you do. We could not possibly close this evening's event without recognizing the tremendous work of those who I have dubbed our social justice warriors. the project's director, Emily Olsen-Galt, and staff attorney, Christina Matheson. In addition to fighting in the trenches on a daily basis for justice, they were also instrumental in crafting today's program. Finally, our thanks go to our litigation section liaison, Koji Fukumara, and my steering committee members for their leadership and support. Thank you for making time to join us this evening to recommit to providing justice to those on death row. Stay tuned for additional information on how you can get involved with the project and its work. And please stay safe and take good care. Good evening.